Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for my closing thoughts on Firefly the Game. So what to say about this that I haven't said already? It is quite simply fantastic. I have played a few more games since I got this one out. I played my game the other day to conclusion and I lost badly. Captain Reynolds came out on top, as he should have done. The universe is a better place for it, I think. Atherton Wing has gone off to lick his wounds. But do you know what? Even losing a game that I thought was a sure thing was so enjoyable. And the way it played out was so true to the narrative. I hate to say it, Captain Reynolds' loyal crew pulled together and saw him through some rather grim battles. And he did lose a couple of crewmen, but it was very, I don't know, there was something about the way it played that just fit the narrative, whereas my lot got increasingly cross with me as I continued to fail. And in the end, I was left wandering around the rim with barely enough money to continue keeping my ship in good repair, and I wasn't really solid with any of my potential employers. It just did not go well. I had to go away and lick my wounds because you know what? The way I played Malcolm Reynolds, I did roll on my self-designed logic tree for how he would behave. He stuck to the game's maxim, which I should have really mentioned earlier. Of course, the clue to success is right there. Find a crew, find a job, keep flying. My mistake, I tried to skip that bit, go straight into that really hard bit, and then discovered, much to my dismay, that that bit really wasn't happening for me. But like I say, the way it played out was so thematic. The imagery, all the stills from the series really help it come to life. If you're a fan of the show, this game will really speak to you, I think. If you're not a fan of Firefly, you might just think, good sci-fi game. But, you know, I would recommend, if you're not a fan of Firefly and you're thinking of getting this game, watch Firefly. Unfortunately, there was only ever the one series and then the movie, and that's it. So it's not a big demand on your time. So the basic game, as I say, is awesome. What do I think of the expansions? Well, both of them are really good. Blue Sun really fleshes out the Reavers. In the basic game, you only get one Reaver ship, and it's dangerous, but you don't really get the sense of impending threat and impending doom that you get. But with Blue Sun, there's suddenly 3 Reaver ships wandering around the board, and there's some new hazard cards that mean that all of a sudden the Reavers are a lot more mobile and they could pop up anywhere. Not in Alliance space. The core will always be safe from Reavers, but you've got the authorities to worry about there, so it's not so great. And the Reaver threat, of course, is balanced by Kalidasa, which not only brings you some new challenges and some new aspects of gameplay, but it also gives you the Alliance operative. Now, he does some good stuff. The operative is sometimes your friend because his ship will clear away Reaver vessels if they get into its path. I've got no complaints about that. But the operative can be mean and nasty, especially if you are harbouring any fugitives that he wants. That's when bad stuff will happen to you. And the operative is much like the Reaver vessel. There's only one of him, but he gets around, and there are random events that allow other players to let him shuffle around, you know, go suddenly from point to point and pop out of nowhere. It all adds to the wonderful thematic side of this game, and the brilliance behind it is you've got so many nods to what happens in the series. But the additional rules, I would say, are barely there. Handful of pages with each expansion, and that's it. So you've got this very elegant set of core rules, which I hope I explained reasonably well in my previous video. And then you've just got these tiny add-ons, which you don't really need to memorize because all the additional rules tend to be covered in in the scenario explanations or on the cards themselves. Hardly any need for rules referencing in this game. And lastly, the other big expansion, which is really worth getting, Pirates and Bounty Hunters. This is a literal game changer because the others add threat, they give you new options, but essentially, if you don't have this, you're still playing in a giant sandbox in a very enjoyable universe, but your options for picking on one another are somewhat limited. When you introduce this into the mix, all of a sudden, if you're so taken by the bug and decide you want to behave towards the competition in a really overtly hostile manner, all of a sudden you can do it. This brings new jobs to each faction, and they can be anything from random revenge attacks to collection of bounties. It dovetails in so beautifully with the smaller crime and punishment expansion, because all of a sudden you can either go in it for the bounty, you can work for the Alliance, you could bring in wanted criminals, just, fugitives from the law generally. And all of a sudden you have this range of choices that give you this sense of, I literally, the verse is mine. I have my ship, I have my crew, I'm the master of my destiny, up to a point. It brings me to the only thing that some players may not like about this game. I don't think it is a long game. The very longest scenarios last, I don't know, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 at the outside if you're unfamiliar with the rules and learning it, or if things are inexplicably moving very slowly. Unfortunately, if you like very simple games but want them to end quickly, this ticks the simple game box, but it doesn't tick the end quickly box. There are very few scenarios in this game that would end in under 2 to 3 hours, so you have to be prepared for that. And also, the more players you have, the longer the game will go on. I would say 3 is a good number. 5 is a real laugh. If you all know the game well and you keep it fairly pacey, 5 is a good number too. The game can accommodate a good few more than that if you have all the expansions and all the ships, but I think it will start to slow down significantly after 5. I've never played with a group bigger than 5, and that was pushing it a bit. We all enjoyed ourselves, but it takes its time. The other thing is, and I think this might apply more to people who aren't familiar with the Firefly universe, is that fans of the series will have an intrinsic understanding that planets in the core worlds in the Alliance control, the ones that are tightly in the Alliance's grip, will behave in a certain way, jobs will pan out in a certain way, the threats you face will mainly come from the authorities, but out in rim space the threat is very different. Now, the way you mitigate these different threats, the threat of arrest and incarceration versus the threat of being eaten alive if you're out in border space, is having the right kind of crew. I mean, that applies across the entire game anyway, but in the early stages of a game, I'd say you're at your most vulnerable when you're recruiting a crew. And if you don't set out with the right people, or at least for the right area of space you're heading for, the right skill set is what I'm really trying to say, you will be doomed to some frustrating times, because if you go to full burn in, say, rim space, and you have a crew of techies, but you're a bit weak on the fighting side and virtually non-existent on the negotiation side, you will probably suffer for it. And if you go into full burn in rim territories with only 1 or 2 crewmen, you might get by, it's not impossible, but you will find the going tough. And this can be a bit off-putting. People entering this universe for the first time and not really being sure what's what may find that somewhat off-putting. If you fall into this category, I would advise you to persevere with the game, because There is some luck of the dice in this, but it's nowhere near as pronounced as it is in the other Firefly game, Firefly Adventures. I would actually say the luck factor in this is very carefully controlled by the game system, and while random stuff can still happen, your decisions have a really great influence on how things pan out. But your decisions, when they're based on experience of both the game and some knowledge of the lore, will it will make a difference. It will make a difference. But those are the only two things I can offer that might be slightly squiffy with the game. I will unhesitatingly say that Firefly the Game is probably one of the best board games I have ever purchased. I have not been disappointed with it in the slightest. I think it's a very, very welcome addition to the collection of anybody who likes science fiction games. If you're a fan of this series, then I would say it's a must buy. It's a little bit like a group of you getting together and, in your own little ways with your own ships, replaying a few episodes of Firefly. And parts of them will be familiar. You know, there's all the references to the episodes and the stories that we know and love. But it will be a bit like watching a different outcome every single time. And some characters will shine through. I've said this before of other games. Yesterday's coward will be tomorrow's hero. Some people like Malcolm Reynolds will always come up smiling. I mean, I must admit, I'd loaded the game against him slightly when I did my demonstration video, and he still beat the... Oh, God damn it. But anyway, anyway, the good guy came out on top, so it's fine. Yes, I think if you go for this game, even if you only go for the core set, you'll have so much fun with it. And I doubt you'd be willing to let it go if you really get into it. It's a marvellous game. It's very well supported by Gale Force 9, and it's also got a huge following on places like Board Game Geek, and there is just so much it has to offer, and it needs hardly any tweaking. I'm one of those people who likes to tinker with games if I feel something's not quite right. Or if a rule is slightly unjust. My group and I will sometimes house rule an alternative. I've not done that with this game. I don't think it needs any tinkering whatsoever. And all I can say is, whoever you are, if you're into something that's easy to learn and fun, and particularly fun with a group of your friends, go for Firefly the Game. I'm pretty sure you will not regret it. But I'm going to close there. Thank you very much for joining me. Very good to see you all as always. And I look forward to the next series of videos, whichever that will be. But in the meantime, thank you very much for tuning in.